So she looked up to her sister.
Yeah, she thought she was going to be pretty.
Yeah.
Instead, she ended up Canadian.
Hello, and welcome to another episode of Unresolved Textual Tension. Maria's not here in this one again, and all I've got here is William.
How would you describe him?
Not ruggedly handsome, that's for
Well,
sure.
I guess that's the end of the podcast then. So usually on this podcast, we do books like prose. But today we're doing a comic. And the reason for that is pretty simple.
Katie really badly wanted to do it.
Katie is what we call a dweeb. She reads comics and she likes them. So today we are reading A Guest in the House. And for once, we have a hard copy of it because there's no ebook, which I looked for, but not yet. So you can pre-order it, which I don't understand how you would get a book out before the image is on a screen, but whatever. And it is by Emily Carroll. And Emily Carroll holds a special place in Katie's heart.
She does. I accidentally found her. Don't remember how. Pretty sure Tumblr. Back in 2012 or 13. And she only had her online like webcomics shorts. And she used, I think, Adobe Flash at the time to do little animation things that really enhanced the horror of certain scenes. And I really thought it was creative. And I felt like the passion she put into it, like it really felt like she thought it out. Like this was something individual in and of itself that she worked really hard on, not just like pumping out a story. And then I went to New York to help a friend find an apartment. And when I was there, we were at some big bookstore. And they had this, Through the Woods, which is a series of some short stories that she had published already online and some she hadn't. And I was super stoked. I was like, oh my God, it's a fur. And then I emailed her and I was like, oh my gosh, I saw your new publication. I'm so proud of you, even though like you don't like, I don't know if proud is the right
I'm not
word.
your parent.
Yeah, but I'm like, I'm so stoked for you. And she emailed me back and she was like, oh, that's really sweet, blah, blah, blah. Then I was like, how do you come up with your stories? And she was like, I write about my dreams. And it was really cool. Anyway, and then I went with my husband to Portland and we went to Powell Bookstore, which is apparently very famous. I don't know. I was told to go there. And then I saw this and I was like, oh my God, it's happening again. And anyway, it was an absolute pleasure to read to such an extent. Immediately after I read it, I texted Will.
It's a good one. And so that was the one that she wanted to do. And I was like, okay. So we were supposed to do it earlier in the weekend. And then again, I had to order it because again, they don't have an ebook version. And so my background is I had actually read some of her comics on her website years and years ago, but I didn't realize it was her until actually after I read this one. Katie told me. And I am not usually a comics reader. I read a lot of manga when I was younger and a couple of web cartoons.
Weeaboo.
Excuse you. It was super cool stuff like Bleach and Naruto.
Oh God, I hate that you say it like that. No, but Bleach
what is it pronounced? Bleche or something in Japanese?
No, Naruto. It's Naruto. Ugh.
But it's interesting because this book really takes advantage of the medium to tell its story in a way that a lot of the comics I've read just don't. There's a syncopated beat to the comic and the way that it tells and grows a sense of isolation and atmosphere around the character and uses the panels to really tell you about her mind state is really masterful and cool. I have some trouble with comics because I often don't quite know where to focus in with them. And I'm not sure if this is a me thing or a comics thing. So we'll talk about it.
Thing, I think.
I don't know, because I had the problem here even. And I was just like, because I don't, okay. A movie is a temporally locked form of media, right? It's a movie is always 2 hours long or however long it is, whereas this you can pause, you can go back. So I have this bad habit of skimming through the text really quickly but not knowing if I should look at the picture first or do I look at the picture and then the text. And so often it'll hit in a weird way. We'll talk later about this one page in here that's like really creepy looking and it hits you, but it didn't hit me as hard because I looked at the thing and I was like, oh, that's a little scary. But then I read it and then...
You couldn't read it and see it at the same time.
Yeah. And so, again, I don't know if this is a me thing or a comics thing because nobody else has ever complained about it.
No, it's a combination of it because, it's funny that you say that I feel the same way sometimes about, subtitles movies when I'm trying to pay attention to especially in action movies, not dramas or whatever, but in action movies or something like that. It's really hard to follow the tension of the scene when you're reading the dialogue.
Funnily enough, this also happens to me a lot with like TikToks and YouTube shorts, is that like they'll have dialogue on screen, but it'll go so fast. I'm just reading it instead of looking at the picture at the same time. So like that's kind of, we'll talk about it a little bit. There are a few pages in here where the tension, the way it flows is really immaculate and just really good. I should just state, I really liked this comic. I thought it was really good. It was one of the better ones we've read this entire year. And so I'm excited to talk about it. We're also going to be talking about her work as a whole a little bit, I think, because you can kind of see her growth as a writer from her early comics to now, and what works and what was like kind of half form.
I'm so chuffed. I can't describe to you how pleased I am. It's like a dream come true. I love her stuff so much. When I texted William last night to ask him how he was liking it, he was like, "It's immaculate," and I was like, "Oh my god!"
That's how I felt about it. It is such the thing it
Clean.
wants
It's
to
so
be.
clean. Yeah.
And again, it tells itself so well. I was really impressed by it. So, do you want to say what the premise of this book is?
So everyone, A Guest in the House is exactly what you might think it's about when you picture the title within the framework of a ghost story. We have our main character, Abby. She is in a house on the lake, and she is in a marriage that is pretty typical, honestly, of an American marriage.
Ironically, and this is the most horrific part of the whole story, it takes place in Canada.
William told me that was the horror aspect of it that truly got to him.
This also takes place in like the 70s or the 80s, which I really liked as a touch. For some reason, it made it feel more small towny and isolated.
I got 80s vibe from it, 80s to 90s rather than 70s.
Yeah, not really 70s, you're right.
It takes place in this small town where mostly tourists come along for their summer, their summer cabin homes or whatever. But Abby lives there with her dentist husband of 1 year and her stepdaughter. And Abby is a little bit younger than her husband. So, he's had a life before her. She, a little less so. And Abby's not exactly happy.
So we have to talk about Abby because I really liked how sketched out of a character she is and how mundane a character. And I think that helps add to the realism of it, which is that like Abby is just, she's kind of shy. She's kind of withdrawn. She's not super attractive. She kind of just married this guy because it was like at that time in the life.
The thing to do.
Yeah, he's very middle-aged, man. I actually really liked him as a character because there's we'll talk about it, but there's a little bit of tension as to like, did he murder someone? Did he not? As the story goes on, but like you could either read it as like he's being sinister or he's just like a normal guy who sometimes is a little bit like short and like a little bit rude or something like that. And I really liked that, and the way the story tells it is really cool. Let me see if I can find the spot I was thinking of. Oh, the other thing to say is that each chapter, the book is interrupted by these because usually the book is in black and white, right? Like this. But every once in a while, it'll go into this super lurid, colorful.
How did we describe it last night?
I think lurid is the word I used.
No, it wasn't. But that was it. That's also a good word. No, it was something else. It was something that means
garish.
Like, garish, yes, garish. Or is it garish? Whatever. Yeah, no, it's almost. It's not pretty per se. It is, but it's also very like cold colors,
grotesque almost also in its intricacy.
It's like gut color.
And it's Abby's dreams of when she was younger and now of being a knight and saving a princess in a tower. And what's really cool is that throughout the book it kind of changes, like who's in the tower, what's going on in it, and who she's seeing. And even really early on you get a sense for Abby, and one of the things I loved about this was this.
Is it this? Oh my God, that's one of my favorite. Okay, when I was reading this, I have so often felt the same exact way when looking at myself. Granted, I go more towards the like, not to be graphic, but like in my darker moments, it's like, bash your skull against a cement wall type of thing. But it's the same thing. And to see that visualized in that moment, and it's quiet too, how it builds up to it. Here, show it again real quick.
So here's what it is, and the way it works is really cool. So the thing is, and this struck with me a lot because like Katie, I have some pretty severe body dysmorphia. And she's talking here about how she's kind of like, one of her notes is, I sweat a lot, my breasts droop, my eyes are always leaking water, and she's talking about how she's not very pretty. And so she's doing that thing where she's trying to hide her like throat
her
waddle.
chin.
And so she's pushing it through, and then all of a sudden there's a little bit of blood, and then it just sprays. And this is a place where it did work for me, the flow of attention, like in terms of like, oh shit, what just happened? And I think it's because it's just a visual and there's not a text portion to it.
Yeah.
But I love it. And again, the blood is in red, which is like a nice highlight that the book does,
Yeah.
which is not like super creative, but it works really well here. And there's just the moment. This is a nice foreshadowing of just like how
Yeah.
she feels.
And also, I think the reason in particular that she does do the blood in red, besides the fact that it's a shocking moment, is that it's her imagination. I think anytime her
Oh, you're
imagination is
right.
being utilized, it's in color.
Yeah, you're correct. That's what's going on. But one of the things I said to Katie yesterday is that I like that no one in the book is hot. In that Abby is, she's kind of like,
She's just a normal person.
and I really like that because again, it really gives you a sense of like why she feels the way she does, and it also kind of makes you root for her a little bit because you're like underdog a little bit. And again, it's kind of just real in that like often comic books are drawn in a way that's visually appealing because you have to see the thing aesthetically, and in this case it really adds to the ordinariness and the horror of it, or the realism of it, which then makes the horror better.
And also Abby is very you can empathize with her a lot because she's supposed to be the everyman basically.
Mm-hmm.
She doesn't like herself. She lives a life that's pretty mundane. She has fantasies about being more than herself. And those of us who are writers and those of us who aren't, but still had a really active imagination, I feel like all of us could empathize with that time that she also engaged with, that she was something more than just like her earthly self. Like a knight, like she's imagining herself killing dragons, knight in shining armor. And there's this very subtle background in it's one single non-dialogue frame, and then it's one other single reference to the fact that her mother probably abused her, and it doesn't go into it, but that explains so much why she is the way she is, because she has a lot of confidence issues and she doesn't know how to interact with some people, even though she's trying her very absolute best to be a good wife, to be a good adult. But she inside feels like she could, like she's more than that and also less than
Mm-hmm.
that because it's not real.
It's interesting too. I thought it was interesting that she sees herself as the knight because that's usually such a male-coded thing.
On purpose.
Yes, the author has very lesbian vibes throughout all of her comics, and I liked that as like a little bit of a it's not something you normally see, so it feels nice that it's different. One of the ways the book gets you into her viewpoint and her sense of isolation, and more than anything, kind of disconnectedness. This is another page that I really liked,
I know.
where she's having a discussion with one of her neighbors, and then every other frame, I can't actually see it, so there's a black thought where she's thinking while the person's talking to her, and that just does a really nice job of getting you in her mindset. Again, it's one of the ways that it really takes advantage of the medium of the comic in a way that a lot of books just don't. The book also hops around a lot, which is nice.
There's also another frame. Hold on a second. I would like to find it. When you were talking about the form for the function. Also, of course, we have these really cool ones too. Again, her imagination bleeding in.
Oh, that was such a weird one. She just felt like teeth.
By the way, that's her husband to be flirting with her in a parking lot.
Who's a dentist. I don't know why I thought it was so funny that he was a dentist, but it's like such a perfect middle-aged job.
Yeah, it's supposed to be like, oh, you're an old dude with an old dude's job, even though not all old dudes are dentists.
I liked this one just in terms of you can see the progression of
Oh, I
events
know.
up here with the actual what's going, like it gives a good sense of time passing and kind of the ordinariness of their life without words.
There's this one part where her stepdaughter, this is not the part I was looking for, but there's this one part where her stepdaughter has made a puppet from school. And
I love that puppet.
during this one scene, let me get it in frame. The puppet begins to get into color because Abby's imagination is starting to encroach on it, and it becomes gruesome like the dragon at the beginning and throughout the rest of the piece.
Oh, okay. So her and her husband, they live by a lake, and they're like, oh, is this the one you were talking about with her grandma? I love
I think
that
it's her
shot.
mother. I think
Or
it's her
yeah,
mother.
sorry, her mother. I love that shot because it's so like slightly
Oh,
sinister, and you
oh,
can see it.
slightly.
Well, and the thing is, it's this would be difficult to do in prose because the thing about it is that this is like such a darkly recessed thought, and it gives you that sense because it's literally darkly recessed while she's thinking about something else. And like it would in it. So comics and film share more of a visual language than like film and prose do. So you could kind of do a shot like that in a movie. One of the things, so I should talk about the form thing. So a story can be told in any medium, but each medium has specific things that it's good at doing and less good at doing. So,
Hmm.
for example, I've often said that you should not try to describe your character's faces that much. Like it's okay sometimes, but bear in mind that the human face is an incredibly expressive tool for emotion. There are hundreds of thousands of slight variations of facial musculature and movement that like we as social animals are trained and evolved to be able to read with a huge amount of subtlety. And you're never going to be able to get that kind of subtlety across with like she smiled. Even you could even be like she smiled with a hint of sadness around the corners, like blah 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 blah, and you're still just not going to be able to match a good actress doing that kind of an emotion. There's a part I remember in a
Where?
movie with Florence Pugh where like
Who
she
the heck's
does
that?
like she's an actress who's like
Oh,
in
okay.
a lot of stuff. She was I don't know. It was called The Outlaw King, I think. It's about the guy after Braveheart. And anyway, one of the things in it is that she does this kind of like thing at one point in the
Hmm.
movie, and like I remember seeing it and being like, I have no idea how you would describe that. Like I have no idea how you would describe what she just
Fair
did in the
enough.
book. And so like, and that's one of the things is you want to take advantage of the medium you're in. And so with writing, one of the things writing can do really well is thinking through thoughts. What's the mind state? What are their actual thoughts one to the next? What are they thinking and seeing? So there are different advantages. And in the comic, what I really liked is that she uses that, and so those are the kinds of things that I'm talking about when I say taking advantage of the medium.
By her being able to take full advantage and understanding her medium to this degree, it comes off as a fully fleshed out product. So it feels like really soulful. Not just because it's good writing, because the writing's good. It is really good, but it's like, there is also other very good writing. But by making it visual, it's because she's also an artist, but not just visual, because it could just be just a comic. But it like breaks the mold of it and it becomes like an art piece. So, for example, some of the things that I was trying to find was, for example, this one, where you would not be able to get away with this in just written because the visual is what tells you what she really means without her actually saying it through the written portion of it.
Oh God, yeah, this is such a nice part.
I
Okay,
know.
let's get to that in a minute. Let's go ahead and describe the plot a little bit more just so people know what we're talking about. The guy she married, right, was married before, and he told her that his ex-wife died of cancer and that the house burned down. And the ex-wife was an artist. And now they're living by a lake, and he's really weird about his daughter, Crystal, her stepdaughter, going into the lake and swimming or whatever. And so immediately you're like, ooh, what's going on with the
Yeah, what's up with
lake?
the lake thing? And then and the thing is her husband, I think his name's David. I don't remember.
Guy with a mustache.
Her husband looks like a middle-aged dad murderer. So that doesn't help.
His glasses go opaque every once in a while
Yeah,
in
yeah, that
comic
kind of
language
thing.
for mysterious and probably did something wrong.
You can tell he loves her.
I liked how well sketched of a character he was. He likes her in a very ordinary way of like we have a
Yeah.
marriage and a happy home. It's not a burning passion, but like he kisses her back one time. He puts his hand on her hip.
I would argue that it's because upon a second read, I noticed he really tries to connect with her in a
Oh
lot of
yeah, that's
scenes.
true.
And he touches her a lot. And there's this one part where he tells her, I like who I am when I'm with you. I'm
Hmm.
a better person when I'm with you. And then also Crystal, the stepdaughter, at one point, like William said, with the water, Crystal was out by the water and Abby's kind of daydreaming a little. And Abby's not had a child before. So, like, I'm sorry. she's a new mom. Give her a break for a hot second. But anyway, I guess it is a little worrisome that she's not watching her near the water. The dad comes home and he yells at his daughter for going into the water because she knows she's not supposed to. And then he's like, and then we'll talk later to Abby. And later on, when she's talking with Crystal, she's like, I'm sorry you had to. And I really love this. It shows what a wonderful mom she could be. She's like, I'm really sorry you saw your dad and I fight earlier. It was not your fault. And Crystal's like, he wasn't fighting with you. He didn't even raise his voice. And she's like, no, I know it was a fight. And she's like, no, you don't understand. He and mom used to throw things.
Yeah.
And then you kind of get this. And then later on, when her husband's holding her from behind, he's like, I like who I am with you. So you get this sense like it's this nebulous idea that
What
is
happened with
he
his
a
mom?
little
Yeah.
is he a little on edge?
Was he the one who was mistreating her, or was she mistreating him? Like, you're kind of like intrigued in the mystery of this already. And so there's also one part where Abby starts or not Abby, Crystal is drawing some like weird stuff at school about a dead mom, her dead mom. Abby, and I love the way this worked. Okay, so Abby is talking to the teacher about it, teacher about it, teacher about it. There's a low angle shot, and the sentence here says, I wanted to ask you if you and your husband might be interested in signing her up for a little counsel, dash, absolutely not. And we switch to the back of him.
What a great, it's like a movie.
That worked so perfectly. It's like this syncopated beat of punctuation that flows one to the next. I loved how that worked so well for me, because I don't know why, but I looked over here and I immediately felt it. And also you can just see the really good body language here. He's looking away, he's working on the thing here, and then in a minute he'll turn around and talk to her, which is kind of his character. He's kind of doing a thing, but he does care about her when he takes a minute to think about it.
Yeah, and he does take time to do stuff, but it's very weird whenever his daughter comes into the discussion in particular, he cuts off Abby a lot. For example, Abby in this moment is like, okay, well, if you don't want her to do therapy, and he also is having this like this attitude where he's like, she doesn't need to go to no therapist, and that'll make her feel guilty for having these perfectly natural feelings. And it's like, yeah, they are perfectly natural, so why? And that's not what therapists do.
Yeah.
So it's like, dude, you're a doctor. You should know better. And then you get that vibe sense of like, oh, it's an older generation. And even it could help portray the generational difference between Abby and her husband. But in that moment too, she says, okay, well, if you don't want her to go to therapy, maybe I should just take a minute and talk to her, see how she's doing. And he's like, no, you don't do that. That's fine. And then she's like, no, I don't mean through therapy. I mean, he's like, no. And it's like, why do you want your new wife to speak to your daughter about how she's feeling, woman to woman?
And it's great because it's done in such an ambiguous way where, again, you're like, did he murder his wife and he doesn't want to bring it up? Or is he just kind of old and stodgy? Like, there's a very, it's like balanced right on the blade edge and the knife point.
It's so good. It's delectable. And so there's this one part, I feel like I can bring it up now. It's because we've given enough information. So his ex-wife's name was Sheila. And there's not many things in the house that belong to anything from prior. It's because of the supposed house burning down. Her husband had told her that there was nothing that was his ex-wife's that still lingered.
Because supposedly it got burnt in a fire.
And so there's this one part where she goes into Crystal's room to just check on her, and she sees a picture of Sheila from high school. And when she sees Sheila, she gets the hots for Sheila. She's like, oh my God, she's so hot, but not really.
Well, the only reason you get that is because of how it's drawn. Let me see if I can.
Yeah, I know.
It. Sheila has a vivaciousness about her in that moment that Abby doesn't ever really have, but it's just portrayed visually, which again is very good. Yeah, and then later, because again she has these imaginations of her as a knight going to a tower, you see that exact frame of the princess in the tower then, which is like is how it incorporates.
She's imposing literally the photo of Sheila into the princess in the tower, and the princess, the blank princess becomes Sheila in the tower. Yeah, that's Sheila.
There we go. That's the picture we're thinking of.
Oh yeah,
and then
perfect.
That's her in the tower. Sorry, I just wanted to.
Yeah, and I like how it says waits for me, like it's hers. You know, like it's ownership to a certain degree. But yeah, so she, like Will said before, Sheila was an artist, and so there's this one painting, and she ends up finding out that the painting was actually Sheila's, and she was upset. It's because she felt like her husband had lied to her, even though she likes the painting. And so she brought it up to her husband, and she's like, is there anything else of hers that's in the house? And he's like, no, 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 there's nothing else. And then it gets to this. So it says, he says, and then she says, of hers in the house, is there anything else? And he just sits there and he says, no, nothing. And then it jumps and it says, but that's not true, is it? And it shows Crystal's room.
And that was just a great, like, again, it's a great advantage of the medium. You have the whole black, and it's like, it interplays the dialogue with the visual very well. They're mixed together, which, again, is not something you necessarily see a lot. Some of this stuff is not groundbreaking for comics, but it's done very well. Another one I thought was actually really interesting was she was talking about how she likes being married. It's this part.
Oh, yeah.
It hurt a little. I felt like I had put on a suit of armor and twisted a key at the side, chasing the air out, fitting it closer and tighter to my flesh with every turn. But I found that it kept me in a shape, and how wonderful a shape. How dizzying. Anyway, as a kid, I always felt like I was seeping away, like my body was being churned by some cosmic hand. And then you see some kind of like weird... This, I think, is the gray lady who she talked about as a childhood friend. And then you see her kind of metamorphizing into the shape of the night, symbolically. And this is a good hint for what happens later.
Yeah,
it kind of sets you up of like, oh, Abby has like a little bit of an ambiguous personality. Like she's easily swayed.
I didn't notice it on the first read because I was like voraciously eating it up and like overly passionate. Abby explains to Crystal, but also in that little thing that we just saw, that when she was little, she had a quote unquote imaginary friend that was actually a ghost, and Abby knows it. And it was a lady called Lady Grey, and she had her throat slit, at least in the image. And so she can see ghosts. Which is really interesting.
Yeah, because Crystal is seeing her mom at the end of the dock, and Abby is literally just like, yeah, it's a ghost. Don't tell your dad; he'll think it's weird. Which I thought was so chill. But I also kind of liked as like, oh, okay, we're not going to be a whole like, is it real? Is it not real? Like, it's just like we know this is going to happen anyway, so we might as well skip to that part.
Yeah, and it shows Abby's how her imagination bleeds into the real world. Now, they are real ghosts, but it still is a stand-in for her imagination and how she's like I think she's trying to draw a parallel with Abby and Crystal, and how Abby's still childlike in that sense and has that like naivety.
Oh, I love this frame. Okay, so they're talking about a book they had both read. That was this one, and she's like, the knight died, and like she's like, I knew there was a part where she died, and Crystal is playing on the Etch-a-Sketch, and then she realizes like, oh, I'm talking about I'm insisting someone died to this girl who had died. And so the last frame is of the like, and this is such a great way, again, visually speaking, this is really cool just to have this scribbled on Etch-a-Sketch there as like this is what Crystal was thinking, and like it's a great little capstone. And again, it's really beautiful in terms of how she tells the story through it.
In the next like kind of like little, after they have the conversation between Abby and Crystal, and that all happens, she has some pretty vivid dreams. And it took me the second read to notice this as well. It's really interesting. She like manifests the princess ghost thing that is supposed to be most likely Sheila, because she's coming from the lake, and Crystal's been drawing her mom in the lake and saying that she's going to go with her mom in the lake type of thing. And also it's like, I'm sorry, wait, why the lake? Didn't she die of cancer? So of course you're like, what's going on? But there's this really cool part where the ghost is like being summoned by Abby almost, and she's like, who is calling me? Who is summoning me? And then it's Abby who's in the tower. And I want you to look at this one. So this is the ghost coming out of the water. And if you look at the clothes that are surrounding, it's the soccer uniform or whatever that Sheila was wearing in the photo. And she's not wearing it. It's almost like they were discarded, like she shed the costume of it. And if you look right here, this is like a wormy tail.
Or like a maggot, I was thinking, in terms of like pale and segmented and kind of fat.
Yeah. And this is most definitely connected to whatever This guy is. And so in this moment, upon a second read, you suddenly notice there's something up. There's something a little more going on with this ghost. Is this a disguise? Like what is this? What is this? And we'll get to it.
And what we find out is that she's like, oh, I like this shape. I hadn't.
Nobody's thought of me as this beautiful in a long time, is what she says.
Also, I'm just looking through this, and parts of it are so creepy.
Like which part?
I don't get scared. Just the way she says this whole portion here. There's something so wonderfully unsettling about it. Warm armor. My knight wears warm armor. Here, the water will cool you off. I've been so alone, so alone. But you found me. She has like vagina flowers coming out of her skirt, which is just thematically.
Look how she drew that. You found me after all of this. It's like she's being enthralled.
No, very much so, yeah. Because the knight is then just like...
And it's kind of like the dragon, too, at the beginning, where she said, I'm standing beneath the dragon, I've impaled it, and I'm standing in the hot viscera. Listen to this, guys. So this is the first page, right? And it's beautiful. It's very colorful and gorgeous. And it says here, and I love the very, very first page, which is very, like... clear cut. It's just like this, right? It almost could be a poster.
I actually thought it at the beginning. I thought it was you know how at the beginning of books they have a thing, I forget what those are called, that are like, to whoever for whatever. I thought it was when I used to dream, but no, that's actually part of the...
And it says, I used to dream of dragons. I would find them, panting, pacing, snug inside damp caverns. When I sliced through them, they would release their riches in a stinking swell of gore and glittering jewels. By the way, side note, there's a lot of alliteration here that allows for a very, like, I don't want to say pungent because obviously you can't smell it, but it's a very, it makes you feel. The g and the stinking swell, like those all contribute to a texture of the words, which is really helpful, by the way. But anyway, so when I sliced through them, they would release their riches in a stinking swell of gore and glittering jewels. And I beneath would find stillness in the hot viscera.
And you're like, that's a weird thing to say.
And then it jumps and it says, these are the things I like these are the things I like about being married.
Again, there's a really nice back and forth. So going back to what we were talking about before, you have this, which is a page of dark, you found me, weird. And then the exact next page it's an all-white page of her sitting at the value save she works at in the parking lot between breaks. Again, you went from a black page to a white page, and this is her ordinary life compared to that weird dream.
Colorless.
And again, there's a jumping about in time that happens in the book that saves time, but also makes you feel like she's a little bit unmoored from one action to the next. It reminds me, honestly, a lot of Upstream Color, which is a movie I really like that has a lot of kind of like weird time stuff going on. Not as much weird time stuff as Primer, which is a time jumping story. Time travel.
Is that a movie too or a story?
Primer, no, it's a movie. They're known for being like indie ones. It's like, but Upstream Color, you can ask Maria about it. She didn't like it, but I love that movie. That goes like jumps in and out a lot, and that's something that this reminded me of. And again, I think it really makes you connect with her isolation and sense of loss. And I don't know. I mean, the thing is, this speaks to me a lot because I often have trouble understanding or feeling connected to reality. Mm-hmm. Like I have this thing that happens every few years where I'll start becoming deathly afraid of sleeping because I'm not sure the me that wakes up is the same one that fell asleep. So I'm essentially dying each time I sleep, which is a problem because I need to nap every day because of some medication I'm on. So it's very counterproductive. Yeah. I often and especially when I was younger, it doesn't happen quite as much now. I'd wonder why I'm me and not someone else. Like that seems so arbitrary in certain ways. Time itself seems like very unconnected and weird. It's one of the reasons I think I find absurdist humor so interesting and funny is because it's like, why are things the way they are and not another way? But so anyway, I connected with that a lot in this book, and I found that this was a really good way of showing it.
I think a lot of people with
mental illness.
Yeah, I was literally going to say depression.
Depression and anxiety in my case.
But honestly, just mental illness is a fair umbrella term for this. I feel like they could, like anybody could. And also, who hasn't been depressed by the mundanity of adulthood and what little promise it has when you're unable to explore your more passionate imaginative what sides, whether that's through cooking or art or travel or reading or whatever. Abby doesn't have any hobbies. Like she tries really hard to get into photography, and I think that's on purpose. It's because she's trying to be Sheila, who's creating artwork, but she can't draw, so she's trying to do that through a different medium, and she's trying to add photos to their life and bring color to the life, but she doesn't like who she is or who she is in this life. It's because of like that metaphor that Will read earlier about her putting herself in a suit of armor and tightening it until she made a form of herself. She's trying to like perform a role, but that role is not one she wants to fill, even though she thinks she should be happy. And there are some things that do make her happy. It's not like, obviously she wants to, I kind of take it, although I don't think it's supposed to directly mean this, but I think it's supposed to potentially mean this, is that one of the, I guess you could say one of the many shades of the definitions of what's happening here is that Abby's gay.
Abby is pretty gay, yes. Especially later on, she get the ghost kisses her, and so yeah, one interpretation I think that's valid and could be sustainable is that,
And she's stuck.
yeah, she's stuck now in she cannot even really, the mundanity and her and performing straightness are, or be her closetedness or whatever, are linked together, and her freedom and imagination and lesbianism, her true self, are the color parts of the book, which I think is a valid interpretation of the text.
Yes.
That makes sense to me. One other thing I wanted to say is that when we talk about writing, we're talking about a few different things, and usually people kind of mean prose, and this book doesn't have prose, obviously, because it is all pictures and dialogue, and she's very good with dialogue. But one place I think she actually would be pretty good with prose is at one point he puts his hand on her hip.
It's the same exact page I was about to go into, because the next page is what I was going to show.
Yeah,
Continue.
his hand went on my hip, in the dip where hands go, in the nook that's made for hands. See, she puts it that's like such a nice way of putting it that makes you think of it differently, and you know what she's talking about, but it also doesn't feel purpley. And that's something that really good authors tend to do. There's an author who I'm not going to say because I don't want Katie to get drunk, who does that often, who will just describe things in a way that packages it really prettily.
And this is where I'm saying, especially on a second read, it seems very ominous on the first read, but on the second read, you read it differently. He's speaking to her and he's like, hey, look, I'm trying. I know sometimes it might not seem that way, but I really am. It's hard to let go sometimes. And she says, let go of what? And he says, and he looks genuinely exhausted and sad in the image. And he says, bad habits, the guy I used to be. And I know I'm not him. I feel good around you. Calm. It's so much different. You help me, Abby. You help me to be myself.
Abby is so clearly gay if you look at this. Okay, because again, yeah, the color is her imagination, right? So he kisses her, and then she thinks about the lady in the tower in her imagination. It's like, oh yeah, she's very clearly gay. That's so funny. I don't know why I didn't really catch. I mean, I got that like she was probably like bi-ish or whatever, but like, yeah, no, this is very clearly a closeted woman. That's really funny.
I think that's one of my favorite aspects of it. And also this next part too. It's literally the very next page. There's a friend, a wife of one of his friends speaking with her at this barbecue. Oh, hey, Abby, don't take this the wrong. And also there's these little moments too that really like make me feel uncomfortable that she does on purpose to make the world seem gross.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, in a few pages previously, or I think actually after, after, this woman is pregnant, and she's beautiful, young, and her husband comes up from behind her to hug her. But all the men have been with all the dudes, so it's like gender split and everything. So it's like this man's man barbecue. And he comes up to her and like nuzzles her, and she's like, "Oh, you smell like beer." And just that, like, that could be innocuous. But the way I think it's meant to be read is like, you're drinking too much. And that in and of itself is already so, it's a fragile, like, discomfort.
There's so much more symbolism going on in this book than I realized the first time.
There's so much. Oh
because
my
as
God.
She's talking about giving her a makeover,
yeah.
There's Abby thinking about the lady in the lake, drawing her over as the knight, and then she gets stomped on by the dragon. And I'm not positive what this has to do with her getting a haircut, but like I'm sure it does, in terms of like maybe her attractiveness. and connected to her gayness.
I really like, though, in the image that Will just showed, if you want to show it again, Will, of the ghost lady leaning against the tree, the way she's drawn is incredibly seductive. Her breastises are like a little out. You're seeing a little more of them. The bottom, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there we go.
And she's like a come hither type
Oh
of
yeah,
thing.
no, for sure. She's saying, "Come hither" in the first one, and the second one, she's like, "I am now ready to be ravished" on the ground.
Yes,
Like that's
yes.
so her pose right there. It's interesting. I'm realizing just how much more gay this book is than I realized the first. Because the first time you just kind of read it, you're going through and you get some of the symbolism and stuff, but like, wow, she's gay.
To get back to the plot too, during this, in the evening, they're celebrating Canada Day. And shut up,
A real
Will, I know.
horror.
And one of the doctor friends comes up to speak with Abby and is like, I think you're doing a really good job. Crystal looks like she's doing a little bit better. He seems like actually a normal character. And but anyway, he's speaking with her, and it's revealed to her that Sheila didn't die of cancer. That's how his wife died. Sheila killed herself.
Yeah, you're like, oh, that is not what he told her.
Yes.
And again, you're like, ooh, did he murder her maybe? What's happening here? It reminded me a little bit of Rebecca, which is a book and then a movie about like a woman, and there's, a woman who like her presence remains even after she's died. I don't think there's a one-to-one parallel or anything like that. I just thought it reminded me a little bit of it. And then this part is so creepy. Okay, so she hears a noise.
I know.
She goes into the downstairs. It's all dark, and then she sees in. You probably can't see this, but there's a strange
little foot
shape, and then she's looking, and the shape, and then bam, gross old lady, dead old lady looking thing. And I like that.
If you look, show them too. If you look beneath the doorway, Abby is spelt out in the red, like it's her imagination coming out.
You're right. And then the next page, she's hot lady,
and she says, "There, it's better if I appear like this, isn't it? This is how you've been picturing me, right? No, please don't be embarrassed. It's actually very flattering. It's been a long time since anyone looked at me and saw a princess. And you picture yourself as a knight." And I love that the ghost is like analyzing her and can read her in like her inner thoughts and stuff.
This starts the middle portion of the book that's very like I didn't love the middle portion. Oh, okay, then there's a weird vision thing. This is Sheila, right? Or am I wrong? I wasn't sure about this.
Oh, it took the second read for me to understand this. It's possession. Notice, so a lady in her night, and right before that, so okay, everyone, right before that, it's still the same scene. And Sheila is saying, "You won't tell her, Crystal. You saw me, will you? Will you, Abby? You understand. Go back to sleep, Abby." And then she's like saying it even more solemnly. She says, "Go back to sleep. Dream." And then it cuts to the third act. And then there's a woman singing in a house. And the house is not the same house as the house on the lake. And if you flip the page again, it's a woman who looks a lot like Sheila, but has Abby's hair color. And so she's singing while she's looking in the mirror. But while she's looking in the mirror, she actually looks like she's happy with the way she looks, and she looks confident.
I get it now. Oh, that's why she says, "I'm going to go for a ride." I was like,
yeah,
what?
She says, "Oh, hey, didn't see you there, kiddo." Like almost like Crystal's in the view. And it says, "Don't tell the old dragon. I'm going out for a ride, okay?" And then she gets on a bike with presumably a man. And then Crystal says, "Hi, did you want to come over? I asked my mom and she said it's okay. Is it okay with yours? Mine said you could even stay for dinner." And then it goes back to the house, and this is the lake house. And then she says, "We'll have to be quiet though. She said she was going to take a nap in the bath upstairs." And then it cuts to blood coming down a stair. And then Crystal says, "Oh, she woke up." And then you look up, and it's like this amalgamation of red flesh dripping from the ceiling. And then it slowly is morphing into what I assume the ghost to be. And Abby is now in her nightgown. And then it cuts to new scenes.
Yeah, and it's like the dream state.
I took that on a second read as her dreaming about being Sheila. And then, like, I think some, like, little foreshadowing of different thoughts of what could have happened. Like that she was cheating, or that she wasn't around, or something to that effect, and that Crystal invited a creature into the
You're
house.
right. This is not supposed to be a literal moment. This is
No,
this
it's
is
the dream.
there's some other stuff that happens or whatever, but then she goes to get a haircut from the young doctor's wife or whatever.
And she hates it.
Well, okay, this is what I thought was interesting. The way I thought of it, and she's looking again in those 3 panels. You see 6 panels, right? And then all of a sudden the next shot is just her upset and just breaking down. And the way I read it is that she thought she was going to be pretty and she's not. And so
Yeah.
it's all of that self-disgust and hate
Yeah.
coming back to her. And then the lady comes and comforts her, which I really liked. Again, there's a sense that her appearance is really a big part of the character and how she sees herself in the story. And then again, there's like a middle portion of this where she's just talking to the ghost and it's fine. And that I felt was like a little bit weird. Like, it's okay. It didn't really bother me, but like my writer brain was like, shouldn't there be more tension building? Or like, doesn't this make the ghost a little too mundane?
No, I don't think so. I think the fact that she's starting to speak with the ghost, she feels more at home with the ghost than she does with her family. And so I think that is necessary for what happens later, for it to make sense.
And especially because she then goes on a camping trip with her family, and when she comes back, the ghost is grumpy about it. See, this is like such a nice just juxtaposition of images.
I know, isn't it?
Yeah, you have the mundane and then the night.
And then during the camping trip too, she's going to the bathroom. As she's going out, she actually kind of like, she says she's here at night when I wake up slipping out of the tent, leaving David snoring. His name is David. Okay, there we go. As I try to remember where the washrooms are, I see Sheila through the trees. For a moment, I mistake her for another patron at the campground, but there's an impossible thing she does, a glow, a sort of bleeding of her edges. It's like looking at a melting candle that suddenly snuffs itself out and then reforms the instant you look directly at its flame. And then the ghost says, "You're laughing." And I feel like this really says a lot. And she says, "No, I'm just a little, I feel silly." And the ghost says, "Why?" "I feel like I've snuck out at night or something, like a kid, like she's cheating." Let's see here. And then they have a conversation about, why did you marry him?
And we have another picture of the creepy ghost.
Oh yeah, where does that happen?
This happens after they get back. By the way, did you catch the Bob Ross thing? Where on the television, he's telling...
Oh no, yeah.
You don't see him, but it's clearly his program being like, this is how you paint a mossy tree. Which, I mean, again, goes into the kind of... He made very accessible art for people, and Sheila was a real artist, and then they're just watching it together, you know... Thematic, blah, blah, blah.
This one part, this is pretty sad. And I feel like this is really also, the time jumps start to happen more frequently at this point. And we get like an image of her sitting in the bath, an image of her imagining some stuff. I go to bed early, sleep a lot. Even as a kid, I remember being tired. Even as a kid, I remember keeping pretty quiet. I watched a lot of TV, watched people out the window, read books until my mom demanded I turn the light off. I remember watching my sister getting ready for her dates, brushing her hair in the mirror. Okay, it's her sister that she dreams of before.
Oh, I thought that was her friend.
No, singing a song to her reflection. I remember thinking, me one day, me. So she looked up to her sister, and
yeah, she thought she was going to be
pretty. Yeah.
Instead, she ended up Canadian. This book has so many great lines. The part here where she's talking to the ghost lady, and she says something about her paintings and how they all got burned, and then the ghost lady goes, "Abby, they're in the attic." It's just a great little punctuation mark. So they go into the attic, and they find that there's nothing there, and the ghost does not handle this well. She starts like just freaking out, and she says, you made him upset by talking about the tower or whatever.
Abby says maybe he didn't, because she's starting to get frustrated, and she says maybe he didn't want to be reminded of a woman who killed herself. And the ghost like uncrumples herself and says, "What did you just say?" And then she becomes this.
Fuck huge ghost creature monster. And specifically, her language here gets really harsh. I was murdered. My murderer's whore calls herself mother of my child, raises my child, feeds my child.
Stupid cow, pathetic bitch.
And it's such a turn, because up until this point, she's been like so nice to her. This is the frame, though, that I was talking about, where I don't know if I'm good at reading comics or something's wrong with the comic or what, because if this was just a picture of her being large, that would have really hit me, and if this had just been dialogue, it would have hit me. But in this case, like, I couldn't quite see her, and then also I kept trying to read the dialogue at the same time, and it kind of just
that's not how
split
I
my attention. How did you read it?
So as soon as I see this, I can't read everything, obviously, but big things I see is I was murdered, I did not kill myself, he killed me. And then all the other things are smaller. So it kind of comes across. So when I see this, I see the full image, but all I see while I'm looking at this full image are the very big punctuated things that are larger than the others. And since the other pieces are smaller and a little longer in what she's saying in some of them, they come off as whispers instead, or like chanting in the
Hmm.
background, is how I see it. So when I'm reading it, I'm not reading the smaller ones. I only see the big stuff. And then once I've absorbed that, I go into the smaller ones and read them. And by doing that, it comes off as this like multi-layered like voice thing happening.
So the thing is, it's worth talking here about how weird our perception of the world is and how it's constructed very oddly. Um, so, like a lot of memory, for example, is actually just backfilled. If you ask people to remember something and the room is cold, they'll remember the memory as cold and they won't even notice it. You tend to fill in things a lot. There's a thing, I think it was ADHD people do, where they'll actually black out for like a few seconds, but they won't know it because their brain will fill in what happened. So, if like they had a book and then they blacked out and then the book was in their locker, they'll have a memory of actually lifting up the book and putting it there even though it's not there because the brain is trying. Your brain generally works very hard to make you think that you're one continuous person. This is like people who have a left right split in their brain where the two aren't communicating. One of them will make a choice, like just an instinct, and then if you ask the person why they did it, they'll come up with a reason. They'll backfill a reason why they did a
Yeah.
thing, and they'll remember it that way. Vision is also like this. You have a blind spot in your vision, and your brain just literally fills it
Yeah, that's
in.
really cool, isn't it?
And so how you perceive something has actually a lot to do with memory. There's a thing in editing too where it's called a J cut, which is that you have the video and then you will have audio play for the next part for like 4 or 5 frames and then cut to the next part. And so technically you're hearing the sound of the new scene before you see the scene, but your brain processes it as happening at the same time because auditorily you process visuals faster than auditory, and also you're used to in your real life hearing somebody talk and looking at them. This is a thing that
Yeah.
constantly happens to you. So for you it feels like one moment even though it isn't. So our perception is often very weird, and I think that's what's happening here to an extent is that Katie is used to reading these in a specific language, and so she's immediately parsing the information in that way, whereas I'm going like, what? Like I don't know where to focus. I think also logistically speaking, what should happen is that I was murdered, and I think here the rest of this page should have just been her face because you read I was murdered, you look at the face in terms of
See, I
attention.
like this though.
Whereas here it was split for me, and then here should have been her dialogue. I think that would have been clearer to me, but again, I just
Fair
don't.
enough.
Again, I think it's just a me issue. I don't think it's a really thing with the book.
You know what's interesting that you talk about that ADHD thing? I don't, I've never been diagnosed with any of that. Not that I've gone out and searched to be diagnosed, but I do have PTSD. And it does something similar when you have flashbacks.
Yeah.
Because when you zone out, I don't do it a lot anymore, but I used to. And when I first met my husband, he used to like be like, "What are you doing?" And I would be like, "I don't know, I'm just looking at something." And then he's just like, "You've been looking at something for like a solid 5 minutes and not moving. What's going on?" And I'm just like, "I don't know. I thought I was just looking outside for a second." And it's really strange. But anyway, yeah, no, this I think it's because, so another comic that I really would like to point out, even though it's one of the more mainstream, actually it's not mainstream, but it's from a mainstream media, it's from Marvel. The and I don't say this because I like Loki so much. I say it because it's actually really interesting, because it's a really cool example of breaking the medium as well, because there's this one particular issue that comes out, and it's too complicated to explain because it's weird. It is. It, like, the Loki comic is absolutely bizarre, and in a good way. It's very heavy with folklore and really heavy with, like, it's about storytelling. Like, the whole thing is about storytelling.
Oh, it's very
how to
meta.
alter story. Yes. And it's about how to alter your perception through how you tell the story. That's the whole, like, thesis of the whole thing. There's this one issue where he literally jumps through the panels on the page to jump to a different scene that he wants to get to.
That's very fourth wall breaking.
Oh, it's the only one where he can, but it's because he's died, basically, and now he's like, we need to alter some stuff. And so he transforms from the god of lies and mischief to the god of storytelling. Because what are stories but extravagant lies?
And so basically, after that, the lady of the lake disappears, and Sheila is like, her life is gray without her, and she goes and she apologizes, and there's a lot of self hate. And she like begs her to see her again. And this is another example, I think, where this didn't quite work for me, because there's a 2-page spread here, right? And so you're reading here, but your eye is drawn immediately to this thing right here. And so I was like, it was hard for me to pay it. This did not come as a jump scare, even though it's meant to be one, because it's very, you see it out of the corner of your eye the whole time. And it's the Lady of the Lake in her dead person form. And that's just another example where, like, I think you could have just had like a black page and then have it or something, but just like having it in the corner of your eye, you look at it first and you're not really surprised. Again, I don't know necessarily how universal that is versus what it is. I once thought he could be my knight in shining armor, but that was never him, was it? Not him. And she's still in her gross form, but obviously she's talking about Abby here. Very nice symbolism.
There's this one double page spread, and I'm honestly having a really hard time fully understanding what's happening, other than maybe assuming that Abby's going through a metamorphosis herself and becoming monstrous, and it's this page.
Oh, okay. So I didn't get this for the longest time, but I think that's the dragon tongue. So the dragon tongue is breaking out. Well, okay, and so later we'll see she is the dragon.
Earlier on, if you look at her armor, it's on the faceplate of her armor.
Is that what it is? I couldn't figure out what it was because it was just too like Baroque looking. So she's sitting on the dock, and her husband comes home, and he's like kind of drunkish. He's like, "Hey, what's happening? What's going on?" And she's like, "Nothing. Just the usual stuff. I got drunk." And then the hand pops up.
Oh, God. But right before this happens, guys, there's this really great scene where Crystal and her are sitting at the dinner table, and Crystal says, maybe, why are they, they're like talking about why he's late. And Crystal says, maybe he got into a car accident. And then it jump cuts while she's answering Crystal. Hold on a second.
There it is. And so she's imagining him actually having gotten hit by a car.
But she's answering Crystal, she said it, and she says, Crystal, no, he's probably just late at work and forgot to call. Don't worry. But she's like looking down at a corpse on a roadside. And it's a really cool, poetic little twist of her imagination again. And again, there's a little color in that one.
The thing is, I got that the color was a punctuation mark when I first read it, but you're right. It's anytime she's imagining anything.
And then anyway, like Will was saying, he comes home drunk. A hand comes out of the water as he's like, Ab, and then he gets pulled into the water and he screams, Abby. And as Abby is being called, her eyes widen and color starts like blooming around her. And he's saying, Abby, help me, help, Abby, help. And she's just like almost entranced watching the ghost drown him. But then she gets in the water and the ghost says her name.
Blammo, lesbian kiss drowning.
Oh, wait, bring it up a little bit so you can see them holding him under the water.
No, I think it's funny that this is just the page that it happens. It's like, okay, I just like her hand too. It's just pushing his face down as
I know.
They're kissing and making out. And then afterwards, she's like, okay, this is kind of weird. And she's remembering it. And she asks Crystal not to go by the lake, to promise. And one thing we haven't mentioned up until this point is at the beginning of the book, there was her neighbor who came by, who's like this portly woman, who's from a house near. It's her neighbor.
Yeah, they're rich, older woman, like a little nosy, but also just friendly, social butterfly.
And she comes by here and she says, "Oh, I'll check on Crystal for you. Why don't you take the rest of the day off?" And she's like, "No, I gotta go to work." And she's planning on running away with Crystal, essentially. And then at work, there's this whole subplot, or not a subplot, but it just came up a couple times that there are some fake bills going around, and they found.
I thought it was so clever. So when I first read this, I didn't notice it, but that's foreshadowing for what's about to happen with the ghost. The fake bills, they're going around.
Oh, you're right. That's clever.
Yeah, I think that's what it is.
So this whole climax, I was a little confused by because I wasn't quite sure who was talking to who. At times, and then I understand it now, so I'm going to describe it as though I understood it, but I had to read it twice to kind of get what was going on. Anyway, she says, okay, they found the people who are doing the fake bills. It's in that house up by you. It's your neighbor's house, and the abandoned one. And Abby is like, no, that's not abandoned. I just talked to the lady there. And the other lady goes, no, you need to know your neighbors better. There no one's lived there for like years. And she's like, and so what happened is I thought it was that the lady she had been talking to was a ghost,
Yeah.
and that's not what it is. It's that her neighbor friend is Sheila.
That's right. I forgot about that. Yes.
So she rushes back home. I think what happened is that so Sheila says that Sheila is there and she's gonna grab Crystal and they're gonna run. And she says that basically she left and then David made up that she died. And Abby is like, no, no, it can't be because remember she just killed David.
And also, Sheila was the pretty princess ghost.
Yeah, like what? No, it can't be you. It can't be you. It's you. All that kind of stuff. It's well done. Again, I kind of couldn't figure out what was happening a little bit.
Yeah, I had this ending really was difficult for me, which is why I really wanted to speak with you about it. So, just to paint it though, so we're in the kitchen of the house. The real Sheila's there, which is the portly woman that was the neighbor and so on. And she's saying, I thought you were at work. And then Abby said, that's the Sheila. No, we don't need to make this difficult. We're just going to go. We won't take anything. I won't say anything to anyone. Chris, take your time. Okay, please stay upstairs. Mom's just going to make a call. Okay. And then she says, and then Abby says, Sheila? And then Sheila says, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I thought I could do this. I thought it was best letting her go. I'm not a bad person. It was just so overwhelming back then. I was in a bad spot. It was best I left. David even said it would be best if I took some time. But I never thought I would leave and then David would leave too and just take her so far away. Tell everyone lies. Tell her lies about me. What did I expect? This is what I get, right? Thinking I could be someone's wife, someone's mom, someone else. So a similar problem.
Yeah,
and then
thematically resonant.
Abby says, you're not Sheila. And then she says, don't come near me. We're just going to go. We don't say anything, but do not test me. Your husband's away on a work trip. Is he? Took the bus, did he? I saw what's beneath the dock, all right. And then Abby says, you can't be her. I know her. I've met her. And then Sheila says, what's wrong with you? Huh, Abigail? I was going to trust my daughter to you, my child, and you're sick. You're out of your mind if you think I'm going to leave without her. And then Abby says, she's not really. And then the ghost is meanwhile behind the real Sheila, looking, wet and glorious. And Abby says to the ghost behind her, she's not really you, right? And then Sheila says, what? And then Abby says, right? And she says, Sheila? And then the real Sheila says, what are you? With the ghost kind of hanging in the background. And then the real Sheila says, I said, stay away from me. I'm serious. Stay back. Just stay away. And she picks up a knife. And then Abby says, because if she's Sheila, then, and then she's still speaking to the ghost, and the ghost is straight behind the real Sheila, holding her in her grasp. The ghost kind of pulls at the real Sheila. Yeah. And it's a little confusing. And she's telling Crystal to run. And then Abby is telling the ghost, then, who are you? And then we see this.
This is a really nice frame, and it helps me understand what's going on in the story. Because if the ghost is actually the old lady, that's the good view and then the bad view, right? And then and then that means that the knight is the dragon in terms of how the positioning is, and it made me go, oh, okay, so Abby is in the wrong there. Abby just murdered two people who didn't really need it.
Get a shot of Crystal gathering her stuff and putting it in a bag, dragging it down. And she comes down the stairs, runs into the kitchen, and she yells, Mom.
We get this shot, and this is supposed to be a little bit ambiguous. I don't love it because I think it's actually a little overly ambiguous. It feels like something that
I do too.
Drew, and then you were like, but see, the thing is, it doesn't really match the symbolism because we just discovered that she's not a knight, she's a dragon, but then the knight is the one that's killing the both of them. So therefore the knight must have been is a symbol of self-destructiveness, but it wasn't throughout the story. It was a symbol of her wanting to be more.
But also, why is the real Sheila holding onto Abby like in an embrace?
I think Abby stabbed her.
Yeah, but how is that? Like, this doesn't make sense. We have the princess in the background shadow, and her dress is like leaking gory flowers, right? Mm-hmm. And then we have the knight, who's the dragon, and the knight is stabbing Sheila through the back, but then it's going through into Abby. But Sheila is grasping onto Abby like it's a hug or an embrace. And I don't really understand what that means.
Yeah, I mean, again, I just took it to be that she was like hoisted by her own petard, as they say. Like
I get that, but I
she
don't get
destroyed
the
herself.
visual.
But and the thing is, like, it's a beautiful picture. But again, the knight doesn't symbolize that. The knight is the dragon. That's the whole point, not the knight itself being bad. And then at the end, this book is actually for Katie.
Yay!
So
Thank you.
surprise!
The only thing in this book that I'm sad about is that I don't understand this last panel.
I don't know, because again, the symbolism otherwise is actually very well done.
Yeah.
And then in this last shot, again, it feels like something she drew first and then told the story, and so then the story didn't quite fit the picture. But we could be wrong. Let us know in the comments if you have a different theory about it or an
I
explanation.
would love to hear it. I just I literally wanted Will to read this without even going on the podcast for the express purpose of me asking what the heck that was. It's because I feel like I'm pretty good at picking some of this apart, but that's above me.
Doesn't quite make sense. But yeah, I really liked this. This was really nice. It was very atmospheric. Again, I think it takes really good advantage of the medium to tell itself. And it's interesting because, again, I was looking at some of her earlier work and her short story work last night. And it doesn't, it's creepy at times, but it doesn't always come together. Like there's one, specifically I'm thinking of the one where it was, there's three sisters in a house and a man keeps coming.
Yeah, that one. That one did not come together.
With wide-brimmed hat and teeth. And at the very end, the last sister goes to see him and it says, like, they were right. He had a wide-brimmed hat and teeth, but he wasn't a man. And it's like, that's a great Wham line, but like,
whatever.
It's a little more showy than it has substance to it. The one I liked better was the one with the leeches and the woman's skin.
I knew you would love that one the most. I knew it.
So good.
I could have called it.
It's so good. You know what it is I like when horror is kind of inexplicable. Like I was watching this thing about a short story collection made into a TV series from Junji Ito's work, who's a very famous Japanese horror manga writer, and like I like his stories that are weird more than just like it was a monster. Like there's one story of his
Funny
where
you
it's
should say.
Oh, Uzumaki.
No.
No longer human. Well, he's known for Uzumaki.
It's actually a collection of all his short stories.
Yeah, there's one where there's a man who each night keeps sleeping for longer and longer in his dreams. Like his dreams take longer. So like one night will be an hour or one night will be like a year of time in his mind, and eventually he becomes so old and lives so long in his dreams that it's like centuries pass and civilizations, and he loses the ability to speak. And that to me is just so much more horrific than it was an apparition. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's also one where people start floating like balloons. That's just weirdly creepy.
Their heads float away from their bodies, and they're like, it's just balloon heads, and they like chase people like but slowly.
And it's just kind of creepy and weird. And so the thing with the leeches, I liked that. It doesn't make any sense that you could have like, it's not like a ghost or a monster per se. It was just like sort of horrifying. And then I also like that in that story at the end, she's like, you don't want to go to the city. The city sucks.
I love that. Yeah.
It's so funny. So then again, at the very end, there's a jump scare where it's like, her brother is also a leech person. And I'm like, okay, that kind of ruined it a little bit, but all right.
There's also another one in here called His Face All Red, which is not anything crazy, but I love it. It's because it opens like this, guys. I just really, really like the prose.
This is the one she's actually known really well for. This is like
Is it really?
Old story by this point? Yeah, I think this is the one that like went semi-viral back before viral was really a
That
thing.
doesn't surprise me because I think it's one of her like most cohesive little shorts because it's really short. And I really love the beginning because we have two panels of this guy watching this really handsome, gregarious guy speaking with a whole bunch of friends. It says, "This man is not my brother. My brother has a cottage with a hawthorn tree and a lilac bush, and a plump young wife with starry eyes. My brother has a fine coat, a vest the color of moss, and a way with people that makes them trust him. This man has all these things." And then in parentheses it says, "And my brother's face, his handsome face. But just last week, I killed my brother." Like,
it's such a great opening. The ending, I feel like just needed a little bit more, but
I can
it's
understand
good.
that.
Yeah, the other one I really like is Out of Skin, which is the old lady who plants a tree on the graves of these girls who were murdered, and then they grow into the tree, and the tree grows into people, and then they haunt her, and everything turns into flesh.
That's the very first one. That's the first one I ever read.
It's good. I really like that one because I just like body horror in general.
Did you notice the little Easter egg in his face all red when they're walking through the forest? And there's this one thing where it's like him and his brother are going off to go try to find this monster thing. And as they're walking into the forest, he says, the woods are cold, quiet, dark. And then we see a tree with little lady, like the leaves look like ladies' hands. And it says, we passed a tree with leaves that looked like a lady's hands. That's from that story.
That was published 3 years before that story. She kind of had set it up beforehand.
Oh, that's really interesting then.
So some of these stories just don't come together quite as well as the longer work. And I think they also sometimes suffer from being a little short in that, like, the thing with short stories or short horror stories is often it's about the twist at the end. It's kind of like a Twilight Zone thing where you're like, the whole time they were people. They were going to eat people, or people are food, or just serve man, or whatever, which is a short story, but also episode. And the thing is that I feel like this story could have been like that. A Guest in the House could have been like that, but you are emotionally with Abby for so much of the book that it's built up, and so the impact it has on her emotionally has the same impact on you. So it's not just an intellectual twist, it's an emotional twist. Like you feel it, like, oh shit. And there's so many good moments in it. And again, I think she's really able to take advantage of the medium to tell her story.
I was actually just going to say something about that. So this is also a good example here. So the brothers in this, right? They're going off to go kill the monster. The brother, the cowardly brother hides. It sets up what this means right here. So you see how it's like a little dark in the first panel, and then in the next one it's red, and then it goes back. That indicates that his brother just killed the wolf. That is actually
yeah, that was a great little bit.
And then afterwards, the brother, the handsome brother says, "Just a wolf," he laughed. "It was only ever a wolf." And then we both laughed, and how I had hidden, and how grateful the villagers would be to him. And then it shows here again, and it shows the brother, the dead wolf, a flash of red, the wolf, and then he's dragging his brother's body in the next one. So it's showing that he's killing without ever showing you.
It's fascinating because it's kind of like that off-screen kills are the like creepiest in movies, and like that's a way of doing it. But it's also kind of like jarring, and you can imagine it with like a jangle of noise in a movie, like almost like white noise or something. But yeah, and so that's another good example of it.
Honestly, though, even though it's literally the shortest, just about, the very last story is actually my favorite because of how it ends.
That's the one that was like 3, right?
Yeah.
Pages.
And it says, there was once a young girl who lived at the edge of a deep, dense forest. Before she left for her mother's house, her father told her, "Don't linger in the woods. Travel swift and safe. There are wolves circling in the dark." And then she says, "Yes, Papa." And then it says, the sun had set and the evening cooled. Fireflies dotted the air. She hopped moonlit streams and took in the scent of pale night flowers. It was a fine, fine night and a good, good walk. After she arrived at her mother's home, her mother embraced her, kissed her, and sent her to bed. And then this is my favorite part. I had this as my wallpaper for the longest time. You know, it has her room right here. And it says, and once she was in bed, she said, "What a fine night. What a good walk. I knew the wolf wouldn't find me." And then we have this next page right here. And it says, this face in the, window says,
the grinning skull face thing.
"Oh, but you must travel through these woods again and again," said a shadow in the window. "And you must be lucky to avoid the wolf every time. But the wolf only needs enough luck to find you once." And that gives me shivers still reading it. I love
it's great. It's interesting how her form has evolved over time. And I'm kind of excited to see what she does next. I don't know if she's going to be doing more kind of like standalone herself things. It mostly looks like she gets work from like other people as like a drawing person.
Yeah.
Artist is the word I'm looking for. But it would definitely be interesting to see more. It looks like she's finally updated her website after like 5 years of not updating. She has a few other comics on there.
That's why I was so shocked to see a book on the shelf. I was like, holy crap. I didn't even realize she was still making something right now because I've been very sadly waiting for more things.
Have you guys read any of her comics? What did you think? Are there any other comics you'd like us to go see or check out on this channel? We don't usually do them, but They're fun. I have no problem with them. But make sure if you're gonna wreck something that it's like it's good. I don't. Sometimes you guys wreck stuff and I know it's not good. I'm like, it's got to be something that like would be that's really elevating the art form. How about let's put it like that.
Also, comics, like reading bad books is one thing, but I don't want to read a bad comic. Like, there's plenty of those. I've seen them, been there, done that. It's whatever.
Yeah, and also it has to be like relatively self-contained in terms of like uh it can't be 300 issues. Like I'm just not going to get through those.
Or it can't be one issue of like Thor in the middle of like
Yeah.
the 7th different plot line.
But yeah, thank you for joining us. Let us know what you think in the comments. And as always, we will see you later.